Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Road to 2000. As always, my name is Caleb Denby, and I will be your driver on this journey. Tonight is a very, very special edition of the Road to 2000. We are hosting our very own championship night. So the wonderful Mike Kummer has organized a tournament that you can join on chess.com by joining our team and heading to a tournament link, which I think Ben is going to be able to pull up. I did send it to him just a few moments ago.
No, I can't.
He's not going to be able to pull it up, so I am going to be able to pull it up. I am the person to do it. The thing to do is to go to the tournament, of course, which is right here on chess.com. But what you have to do first is you have to join our team. So search up the St. Louis Chess Club, and we do have a team right there. There it is. Here's our team. So this is what you guys got to join, the St. Louis Chess Club, and then here is that tournament right there. And that is going to be starting in 10 short minutes. So everyone in the chat, I know we have all gotten to know each other. We've all gotten to improve together these past, well over a year now. But now is your time to shine. I'm talking to you, Peter Peterson. I'm talking to you, Pippin Chuck. I'm talking to you, Adi Chandra. If you've been following this class a long time, now is your chance to prove that you have been paying attention, that you have been learning. And by the way, the stakes have never been higher. They've never been higher. The winner of this Road to 2000 championship is going to get a private lesson with me. What better reward could there be? I, of course, don't normally give private lessons. I'm normally too busy doing all this stuff for, groups of people, for the masses. But it's true, a private lesson with me. It's a rare occurrence, and it is the prize of this tournament. Now, this tournament is actually going to be 7 rounds long, and it's going to be a blitz tournament of 3+0. So while we do have some time to get started here, before we get started, I wanted to teach maybe a little bit of a mini lecture on blitz games. And to do so, I want to highlight a particular game I had against the wonderful Jonathan Schrantz, who many of you may know. Now, the purpose of this game is to show you that blitz is sort of a funny version of chess where you can get away with doing a lot of things wrong and still win the game. So let's take a look. In this game, I had white, and Jonathan was playing with the black pieces, and we had been playing a long match that just wouldn't end. So I decided it was time to have some fun. Started off with the move 1f3, which is obviously not ideal. And Jonathan replied with d5, and so of course I follow up with the natural continuation of g4. So of course this is dead lost for white, but the point is, when you've been playing blitz for a while, when things are not going particularly your way, sometimes playing something completely random and completely awful is just what you need to, sort of get your mojo back. It is a very, very valuable thing to get your opponent into a position they aren't comfortable with, a position that they don't understand, that they don't know what's going on. Because if you can achieve that, then you have sort of leveled the playing field, right? If you're playing a random position in a 3-minute game where neither you nor your opponent know what's going on, you're both going to have pretty good chances, even if it is objectively bad. So I started with f3, g4. Jonathan replies with e5, making a threat, by the way. Don't hang fool's mate. So I follow up with bishop to g2, giving my king the flight square on f1. Knight c6 by Jonathan. Now d3, and I'm taking over the center of the board. Queen back to d8. Jonathan is now potentially showing the downside to having a really, really good position. You start to get a little bit nervous when you develop the queen out a little bit early on in a blitz game. Perhaps Jonathan was looking at some things like knight f6, when after knight h3. I have actually in the past won games like this before, when this queen is getting a little bit stuck out here on h4. But Jonathan was like, all right, I'm not having any of this, and retreats back to d8. And then the game continues with d5 takes on e4. And eventually, we do develop our pieces. I come out with bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, And then Jonathan actually replies with g5. And after bishop f2, suddenly my terrible, terrible opening is not looking so bad. And that is often the case in blitz games. So what's better than playing, a terrible opening and getting a great position? I don't know. That being said, there's a lot of game left to play. So let's talk about what happens, because the game takes a very significant turn in the next few moves. Jonathan first takes on f2. I take back, and then we get to a strange-looking position where I don't think Jonathan was comfortable. I don't think Jonathan knew what to do here. And that, again, is the value of playing something crazy and offbeat. In the game, he went with knight to d7, and now I decided to start launching an attack with knight d5. It's very valuable to be on the offensive in blitz games, as it can, once again, put your opponent, off their rhythm, off their balance. Jonathan decided to take. I take back, and now after knight d4, I take back on d4, develop the bishop out to e4, then all of a sudden, after queen f3, I'm definitely looking to play for mate. King g7 played in the game, h4 played by me, queen d7, and now we open the h-file. Jonathan goes after this pawn on g4, but this actually turns out to be a mistake, because after the move king to g3, black is actually completely busted here. No way to save this knight. So knight e3 played in the game, but this, of course, loses to check. Bishop h7 check, rook check, and checkmate. And that is the story of how I defeated Jonathan Schrantz with one f3 to g4. So what happened in this game? What can you take away from this for your upcoming tournament here in the Road to 2000 Championship? Well, the point is, don't focus too heavily on openings. Don't focus too much on taking yourself too seriously. It is a blitz game, and all you need to do is play good tactical chess, and that's enough to win these games. So, there are only 5 minutes remaining until the start of the tournament here tonight. If you're just joining, once again, this is a very, very special edition of the Road to 2000, where we are having our Road to 2000 Championship. So, there's a link in the chat. Please join the St. Louis Chess Club team and then join this tournament. The first place prize gets a 1-hour private lesson with yours truly on the camera right now. It doesn't happen often, but it could happen for you. So please join in. We have just 4 minutes until the start of the event. So why don't we take a look at our competitors here? It seems that there is a clear favorite in someone named D. Diaz-Ron. No clue who this is, but they are rated 2000. And second on the rating list is So Much Better Than You, who you may recognize as a username from various other events. That is the one, the only Michael J. Kummer. So are you guys going to let Mike Kummer win his own tournament? Absolutely not. It looks like we have Orlando, a great Scholastic instructor, playing. And Manny. There's our first Road to 2000 regular representing. Yo, those other regulars, Peter Peterson, everybody, get in there, play this event. Prove that, this class is worth something. We also, it looks like we have Alex, who is a recent new employee. We have Nick Mike, who I think I recognize from some lectures. Someone named Jai Blexi, someone named Yash. Other people, no clue who these are. Adi! It's Adi! I'm sure most regulars recognize Adi from the lectures. He's always here. Northern Fork. DWI! The German DWI is here with us. DeWerting. And I think that 800 rating is a little bit misleading. DWI has proven to be quite the player, so keep an eye out on him. Just 2 minutes left to join, everybody. Make sure you are clicking that link in the chat. Make sure you are joining this club. We have 14 players in the event so far. That's a good number. And we'll see who comes out on top here. We'll see who comes out on top. I know myself, I am looking forward to this event. I always enjoy doing this kind of commentary over especially those blitz games. Keeps things interesting, keeps things fun. Let me know if this is something that you guys enjoy, and maybe we'll host more commentary over these club tournaments on this channel. Definitely not as a replacement for, my normal classes, but maybe something we can do in addition. I have a lot of fun with it, and I think you guys might as well. But that being said, 2 minutes left. Join up. Join now before it's too late. I think you may be unable to join once the tournament starts. So, minute 40 seconds on the clock. Get going. Get joining. Maybe some of you will find the glory that I found in my game against Jonathan Schrantz. Steve North is in. He is Northern Fork. Steve, another great regular of the Road to 2000 class. All right. Counting down the seconds here. Minute 14, minute 13. Literally counting down the seconds. Adi says he's playing too. I see you, Adi. I see you. Hassan wants more commentary. That's great. That's great. Maybe I will be able to provide. Peter Peterson is asking for someone he can beat. But Peter Peterson, right now, the lowest rated player in the event. Definite underdog. Definite underdog here with Derwerting on the new account. He's going to have to face some tough competition right away, such as Steve North in the chat and Adi Chandra, the ringer. Keep an eye out for Indiana Jones 2020. Apologies for that username. I do think that movie got delayed like 2 full years. But Indiana Jones 2022. I'm looking forward to the new account when that day does come. Thank you everyone who has joined. Up to 19 players. Chess Playing Wolf has joined. Chess Playing Wolf. Is that the Danny Machuca? Is that the man in the shadows joining this event last second? I will not be joining. I am purely here to commentate. It wouldn't make a lot of sense if I joined my own tournament, especially if I didn't win. Then I would be embarrassed. And we are underway. The tournament has officially started. Let's get going on some games here. Who do we want to start with? I got to start with my guy, Manny LP. Looks like we have a Petrov, knight e5, and knight c6. Okay, a little bit of a strange line here. Usually, black continues with d6 to kick the knight away before recapturing on e4, but instead we have knight c6, and white is maintaining an extra pawn. But, you know, black threatens checkmate. We'll see what Manny wants to do against it. And I think definitely the story of any blitz tournament, really at any level, is the story of the clocks. It's the story of time management. And Manny may be up a pawn, may have a good position here, but gotta stay level on those clocks or it's all for naught. We'll see if C. Myers can put on the pressure there. Okay, we get kingside castles by black, and white now should just develop. C3 is an okay move. I might have even preferred knight c3, bishop e3, bishop e2, anything to get those pieces in the game. Like I said, it doesn't have to be about accuracy. It's all about getting to a position where you're comfortable and your opponent's not. And a great way to do that is just to develop your pieces very, very directly. But c3 is also a very good move. We'll see where this queen ends up going. If it goes to e5, look out for a d4 push with the fork. Okay, instead we see queen d7, which is not my favorite move. It sort of hems in this bishop. d4 forces this bishop back. I like it. Now I think definitely white should play d3 and castle on the next turn. Bishop d3 rather, and that's what we see. It would be a mistake to play a move like e5 because it's actually granting black some squares that were previously unavailable. Now we see black playing h6. Perhaps he was concerned about the move bishop to g5. And then we actually do see the move e5. So Manny is probably doing this with the idea of checkmating on the light squares, but I think it was a bit rushed. I definitely would have preferred to see castles when black would be suffering with this knight on f6 rather than having it on an active square. Okay, queen to e4 is the follow-up. Playing for mate, black must play a move like g6, but that hangs h6, f5, maybe f5 is the idea for black. If f5 and takes, there is knight takes on f6. Look out for a rook e8 move, actually, even immediately. Wow, okay, d takes f6, and rook e8 picks up the queen. Caution, Manny. I advise caution. This could go wrong. This could all go very, very wrong very, very quickly. This is why white should have castled. Just step out of these tactics before they ever arrive. You don't need to win the game in 12 moves. You just need to win the game. All right, Manny spots the danger, fortunately, and comes back with queen e2. just keeping that queen safe. In the meantime, let's check up on a couple other games going on. How is Adi doing? Adi up against Nick Mike here, and as I open a second game, it messes up the layout. I'll keep 2 games open, but Adi is up a ton of pawns, the underdog in rating, but you can never count Adi out. You can never count Adi out of any kind of chess game. That guy is a fighter. That's a free pawn on d3. Adi just keeps collecting. Rook back to d2, rook f to d1. This d6 pawn is going to be falling. Looks great for Adi Chandra. All right, back to Manny. Back to Manny. Just wanted to peek in. How's Manny doing? Manny's setting up some threats now. There's bishop e6. Black is actually now expanding on the king side. It's a pretty interesting position here. White, of course, should always be better with this astounding central control. And white should also be better now that I counted the number of knights on the board. What happened? Where did this knight go? It was so pretty on d5. Oh no, C. Myers. No, not knight f4. And yeah, with that, white should just be winning this game, I believe. Should just be winning this game, although it is 3+0. Don't forget, 3+0. White may have more knights, but black has 3 extra seconds. Now 0 extra seconds, but they did have more time, briefly. Now -4 extra seconds, but they did find a move, and as the clocks dwindle down, it's going to come down to who is the speediest between the 2 players. It's not always about how good you are. It's sometimes about how fast you are. Okay, bishop takes e6 maybe. Manny just can't get bogged down trying to calculate moves like knight e8. It's much more important just to keep the moves coming, keep the flow going. If you start pausing and thinking, trying to win more material, that is when things are going to get out of hand and you'll find yourself with no time. Adi Chandra has somehow drawn by stalemate. Adi, no, not stalemate. Oh, you hate to see that. But okay, the action continues here. Manny with a great position, but the clocks are falling. Manny now with less time even. That should never happen. Not when you have the better position. Who cares about your center? Just play chess moves. Just take it, just move, get the rook in, just keep it coming. Keep it coming quickly. Okay, rook c6, bishop h6, that's a winner. That's a winner right there. The queen will die, or maybe the queen won't. King h2 pre-move. Okay. And Manny's queen falls, but Manny understands the name of the game here. The name of the game is blitz chess, as in fast, not slow. And despite the material deficit, Manny is converting with what I would say is arguably perfect technique. Tough to argue with the move rook to d6 being imperfect technique. Great stuff by Manny. That's how you win a blitz game. Doesn't have to be pretty, just has to win. All right, who else won their first round? We have our #1 seed, D. Diaz, winning his first round. Danny also wins in their first round with 1 point. We have Magic M1, who I did not see joining the tournament, but they have a point as well. DWI, with their first win of all time on chess.com, has a point. Ruben Dario Medina Diaz has a point as well. Jay Blexy, G. Naren, and then we have our 2 players, Nick, Mike, and Adi, both on a half point. Everybody else, off to a rough start. Mike Kummer, off to a rough start. How did that happen, Mike? How did that happen? We may never know because the next game's underway. This is going to be the game we follow here. We have DWI, who is massively underrated, against the #1 seed, D. Diaz. And we have a C3 Sicilian. All right, let's see what we're working with here. And a quick bishop takes C3. White now has the bishop pair, but black has a good light squared setup. That is what you really aim for against these pawns. White is going to look to achieve the move c4 without making too many weaknesses, and D. Diaz does achieve it. And now black is going to look to pressure these pawns from the front here. With the pawns on d4 and c4, I don't think white should be any worse, but black is definitely still in the game, and it's very, very easy to let one of these pawns slip if you are not very, very careful with the white pieces. So, yeah, rook c8 and rook d8 as expected. Black now pressures these pawns down these files. You can expect white to bring this rook to c1 as well. And then it becomes a question of, can white do anything with the extra space? And after this move, bishop g5, it's looking like maybe they can, although questions are being asked of the d4 pawn as well. A complicated position. I like this move, bishop g5, by white. It puts on the pressure on this knight, and yeah, I don't think this pawn is ever going to actually be capturable. So, what is the character of this position? White has extra space with these two pawns compared to these two pawns. However, these two pawns are a lot weaker than these two pawns. So black aims to pressure these pawns. White aims to use that extra space in order to launch some kind of attack on the king in most cases. So look for moves like knight e5 to be coming. In the meantime, black went for a very strange h6 g5 push in order to break this pin, and maybe this was a good idea in this case. That pin was very, very annoying, and now look out for knight e4. Knight e4 even immediately I think was quite strong, aiming to take this bishop and fracture the pawns on the king's side, also hitting this rook on d2. Still knight e4. Yeah, and there it comes. DWI does take on g3 immediately. Even the move f5 there looked quite tempting. Just cementing this knight on the e4 square could have been powerful. Now, how to continue? Knight a5 by DWI, aiming to activate this bishop as well. And what's this? What's this? The future has been foretold. Once again, white got a little bit careless with rook d3, and now the c-pawn suffers the consequences. That's the danger of these positions. You get this extra space, but those pawns, they do sometimes just drop off the board, and that's what we see here. What should white have done instead? I don't think white's plan of doubling on the d file really made any sense. Your goal is oftentimes not to really push d5 in these structures, it's to go after the king. You have to launch some kind of attack. Knight e5 had to be played a little bit earlier on, and then I think white would have maintained some advantage. Instead though, DWI with a pawn to the good here. We see rook c2, black is aiming now to invade on the second rank. Also, knight c4 threats, and this queen is looking very short on squares. f2, the only square available. Okay, rook d2. Maybe queen b4 now. Activate this queen a little bit. This is the part of the game where black needs to pick up the pace. As in the previous game with Manny, these two players are a little bit higher rated, but that doesn't mean that same idea doesn't apply here. When the clocks get below a minute, the position matters less and less. What's important is who can make normal, comfortable moves the fastest. And right now, that appears to be Diaz. Okay, knight c4 is not a bad idea by black, even if it is a bit risky, and I think this was missed. I thought bishop takes c4 was black's idea, but instead rook takes c4 is sacrificing the exchange, and now d5 is making some awkward threats for black to deal with here. Okay, we see e5, but this cannot be correct. Now white will have a passed pawn, and black is going to struggle in this endgame to keep things together. Queen d7, bishop e6 is a blockade, but I'm not sure it's going to hold. And most importantly, Diaz has been able to keep the pressure on the clock, and that is what's going to make the difference in this game. Queen f6, white can aim for some checkmating ideas now, although it is difficult for this rook to get to the 8th rank. Just queen e7 was the point. Wow. Yeah, black should avoid this trade, but now, yeah, d7. One last trick, but it's not meant to be. DWI goes down, and the #1 seed maintains the leader's spot. Any other games still in progress? Let us find out here. Manny's game is still going, but let's check in on G. Naren against Magic M1, and it's a time scramble. Go, make a move. Everybody just pre-move. G. Naren was down on the clock, made a couple fast moves, but Magic M comes in with the clutch check at the very end to seize victory. All right, where do we stand after 2 rounds? We still have 3 players on a perfect score. DDS, who we followed, we have Danny, the chess-playing wolf with a perfect score, and Magic M1 with that dirty flag is also catapulting himself into the leader's position. Only 3 players with the perfect score. By the way, our 2 players that drew in round 1, Nick, Mike, and Adi, both winning their second game, moving up to 1.5, tied for 4th place. And then I'm sure we have a myriad of people on 1 out of 2. And what's this? Jai Blexi defeats Manny to jump to 2 out of 2 as well. Incredible stuff so far. These are exciting, exciting games. And Steve North has won by forfeit. Unfortunate. Manny blaming the internet, of course, as always. When in doubt, it is the internet's fault. Okay, these look like some pretty big mismatches, so I'm not going to follow the top boards in this case. Why don't we follow? Who should we follow? Who should we follow? Maybe we should follow Adi. Let's follow Adi's game here against Alex. Alex, the front desk employee, versus Adi, the longtime stream watcher and I believe photo editor for the St. Louis Chess Club. And what do we have here? Adi is adopting a more systematic approach, going for e4, d3, looking to fianchetto this bishop. In the meantime, Alex going for rapid play on the queen side. Yeah, knight a4 is always a little bit uncomfortable when it can be met by queen b4 check, but yeah, Adi navigating the difficulties, finding c3 to defend this knight, and it's Alex who's on the back foot here. It is definitely Alex on the back foot. But how to continue for Adi? Now, unfortunately, things are still awkward with this knight. This knight cannot retreat, it cannot come to c5, it cannot come to b6, and what does that mean? That means b5 is a threat. Adi pulls out the move d4 to try to solve this issue. Now b5 would be met by a knight takes c5, but I'm curious, what is the response to pawn takes on d4? Simply knight takes d4. And if b5 now, are we going to see b4 in response? This is exciting chess by Adi here up against Alex. Okay, we have a trade on c6 and e5 by Adi. So, Adi, foregoing early development, I would have liked to see bishop g2 and kingside castles a little bit earlier on, but it's all, you know, for the sake of making early threats. We finally do see b5. I think b4 is the only move for white, but I do think it's good enough. If you try bishop b4, then cb4 and bishop d2 gives me time to save my piece. Instead, we see knight to c5, and what's this? A fork of the king and the rook? Not bishop takes c5 is what I expected, with b4 to follow. Adi doesn't even take any of it. He just leaves the rook hanging, says, I have a fork whenever I want it, but I have my doubts about this particular variation. Too crazy for me. Too crazy for me. It looks like black should be keeping the piece at the end of the day here, thanks to queen b6 attacking this bishop. Now black should have time to save this knight, and the play will continue. Looks good for Alex. I think, you know, while the complications could have gone either way in that particular opening, I think they have broken here for Alex. Adi put up a valiant effort and will continue to fight, but this one looking good for Alex. Ooh, and that is a queen. You hate to see it for Adi. All right, let's check in on the leaders now. Let's see how Magic M is doing against D. Diaz. Looks like Magic M has a perfectly reasonable position, a little bit of extra space, even material, and perhaps an attack against this king. All right, how is Danny, the chess-playing wolf, doing? Danny is doing pretty well, it looks like. Doing pretty well. This, I don't know how we got here with no kingside pawns for white, but Danny seems to be out for blood, which I thought was more of a vampire thing to do, but turns out chess-playing wolves, they're out for blood as well. Tough. Yeah, knight to g4. So what is the threat? The threat, I think, is knight h6, queen g6 when checkmate is coming. No, Danny just takes on f6, but I don't know if I necessarily like this decision by Danny trading off. Okay, take back on e5 now. We'll remove this knight. And I think, again, queen g6 is going to be the winning idea here. Danny just needs to play it. I don't know why he's not. Okay, we do see queen to g6. Knight f4 check is, I think, the only reasonable try. Bishop takes, rook takes, queen check, king f8 is on the run, but what's going on here, actually? What's going on? Is black getting away with it this time? There's sort of counter checkmating ideas. I think this one should break in white's favor. Queen h7 check, king f8, perhaps the surprising move, king h3 is playable if rook... maybe the simplest is rook a to f1. You neutralize this rook by pinning it to the king, and if that rook cannot move, then white is never going to get checkmated, right? Instead, we see queen h8 check, and now rook a to f1 does come, and I do like this decision by Danny. Now king h1 is safe as can be. Safe as can be. No checks available. Queen h4 is met by queen takes h4 when that rook remains pinned, and that will be the match. Alex, by the way, does end up defeating Adi in their game, and here Jay Blexy is just accepting defeat with the clock running low. And that's a third win in a row for Danny. By the way, Magic M, who is this person? Another new account with a misleading rating, perhaps. Our number 1 seed, D. Diaz, has fallen to Magic M. We liked Magic M's position, but how did it happen? We have f4 here, takes, queen e8. We saw it here. Now c5 is the interesting idea. Potentially hanging an e-pawn. Black captures, but now bishop d3, check, king here, and rook f7. And was it a blunder or a sacrifice? The open b1 to h7 diagonal now is where white's going to aim to attack. We have bishop c3, and then, wow, the very bold queen c5, just placing the queen opposite the rook. And eventually we see the bishop h7 sacrifice, and wow, what a beautiful game. Check and mate. Magic M taking the lead. I look forward to this matchup between Danny and Magic M for the sole first place lead. The only 2 players left with a perfect score. In the meantime, we have Alex moving to 2 out of 3, Manning to moving to 2 out of 3. We have D. Diaz falling to 2 out of 3. DWI is up with 2 points. Steve North has 2 points as well. Ruben Dario Medina Diaz also has 2 points, as does Keshav Garg, and yeah, 2 players on 50% still. All right, fun stuff. Let's check out this leadership matchup here. And we have Danny starting with the brave f6, king f7. Perhaps he saw the pre-tournament lecture here on what to do in your blitz games. We'll see how this one works for him, though. e6 and knight c3. I will say, Danny has already made a fatal mistake in spending 20 full seconds to play these moves. If you're going to play bad moves, you might as well play them quickly. No reason to take your time arguing the benefits of f6, king f7, or e6, king e7. You know, do I play e6 afterwards? No reason to think about it. Just play moves. And now we do see Danny taking an edge on the clock. We do see that edge on the clock here. Okay, b6 by Danny. He's finding some way to develop these pieces. Kingside castles is normal enough. Normal enough. Okay, bishop b7. And the problem here for black is that his position is bad. Why is the position bad? Well, f6 and king f7 are not the most useful moves in the world, and in fact, in this case, they are somewhat harmful actively to the position. We'd much rather have a knight on f6, allowing us to control e4, but now that's simply unplayable thanks to this pawn being in the way. And we do see e4 now by white. Now, if you recall, we had a similar position between D. Diaz and DWI in a sense that, you know, one side had 2 further advanced pawns, granting them a spatial advantage, but the other side is going to look to pressure these pawns in order to find some counterplay. In this case, of course, it should be a very, very good version for white here, with this king stuck on a weak square and these light squared weaknesses ready-made for an attack. In the meantime, though, look for Danny to put some pressure on these pawns. If one of these pawns falls, then I do think Danny is surprisingly going to have the edge after the slightly suspect opening. Ooh, and e5 is a nasty move to see. White is now looking to open up this e-file and go directly after e6. Bishop b5, though, this is a little bit of a misstep. Now is not the time to be making one-move threats. You need to advance your light square play. c6 comes with tempo for Danny. This bishop retreats. I expect to see b5, forcing this bishop even further back. And was that a pre-move by Danny? Danny anticipating the e takes f6 capture and pre-moving his response. Danny now up 40 seconds. And if that's not an advantage, I don't know what is. Knight d5 coming now, and even the board position is no longer looking so bad for black. Yeah, and this is exactly what you should do, right? Just pay attention to my lectures, and then use what you learn, and you will win the game. All right, we have h4 by white. And yeah, white definitely should not give up the attack on the king here. That is sort of the major problem with black's position. Also, by the way, is a pawn hanging. Perhaps there is a takes, and queen takes problem that both players are ignoring for the moment. Okay, now this knight has to leave. h7 is hanging, but there's rook h8 to follow. Very unclear what's going on. What is very clear is that Danny is building this time edge, and I would be very surprised if this game didn't make it to a time scramble. Ooh, queen d3 though. Some accurate moves here by Magic M is going to keep the pressure on. Bishop g6 check might be playable. Okay, queen here, and is f5 a problem? I think it is. f5 is missed though. f5 interfering. The connection between these two pieces would have been winning a piece. g4 is an attempt to stop it, but perhaps f5 anyways. Now Danny just plays king e8, and I like this from Danny because whatever he does quickly, and that's all that matters here. Yeah, sacrifice a rook doesn't matter. Just get the king out of harm's way, and your opponent will lose on time. Knight e5, that's a free knight. I'm taking that piece. I'm taking that piece. Bishop takes is the idea, maybe queen b4. Queen takes e6 is a threat, though. Queen takes e6 is a threat. Okay, it's coming on the board now. King d8, though, or king c7. And 6 seconds is just quite simply not enough time. Danny will be able to win this one. Just removes the final attacker. And now knight d6 is even preserving an extra piece. Okay, king d7, losing the rook, actually. I did not even notice this. But 4 seconds is going to be tough. Okay, now 3.9 seconds. King d6, check. That was not mate in one. The knight covered. The knight did cover. Perhaps king d7, knight e7 should be played. King c7 instead. And yeah, Danny is perhaps slowing down a little bit too much. Okay, now knight h4 picks up the queen. Now knight f4 picks up the queen. Both knight checks would have picked up the queen. And we see Danny getting the win, taking those life lessons from the mini pre-lecture with f6 and king f7. All right, who else? Who else is still playing here? Danny, our only player with a perfect score. We have Dylan, LO215, who is losing on time to Bogo Taco. Bogo Taco, now that's a good name. Does Bogo Taco play the Bogo? Bogo Taco does not play the Bogo. I'm very disappointed, Mr. Bogo Taco. Very disappointed, but congratulations on the win. I believe that concludes the round. Danny now the only player with a perfect score. We'll see if he redeems that free lesson with me. DWI also claiming his way back up with 3 out of 4. Manny with 3 out of 4. Diaz with 3 out of 4. Alex and Magic M1 all on 3 points. Who should we follow today? Right now, who are we following in round 5? We are entering the latter half of this tournament. Actually, we already did enter the latter half of this tournament. Why don't we check out Northern Fork? I want to see Steve North in action here. I'm going to flip the board because Steve is definitely a regular at the Road to 2000 show. Okay, we have bishop c4 and d6 by black. So I know many people are beginners here, and this is unfortunately how a lot of beginner games go. They sort of know that they're supposed to do something like e4, e5, and then they sort of slowly just develop their pieces, and oftentimes they run into traps like the fried liver, which is exactly what's going on here. Now, normally, the fried liver comes about in this particular move order: bishop c4, knight c6, knight g5, d5. Over here, we first saw a 4 knights, and then black unfortunately had to lose a tempo here. So this should just be a very good version for white. So what's my advice to you beginners who are running into these traps so early on? Well, my advice to you is it's never too early to start thinking about your chess moves, okay? Just because you're in an opening doesn't mean you get a free pass to not think until you're in the middle game. The opening is still chess, and as such, you still have to be thinking about threats, responding to threats, and worrying, concerning yourself with making threats as well. Just because it's the opening doesn't mean you don't have to think. Okay, Steve, though, is surviving for the moment. White is pinning this c pawn to avoid the threat of c takes b5, and I like what Steve is doing here, just getting developed. Steve's going to castle, develop the light squared bishop, and then we will have a chess game on our hands. Okay, bishop e7, a3 is a very strange move. Bishop g4 now comes with tempo, and this is a counter punch by Steve. Once again, never too early to start thinking about these things. Bishop g4 is going to remove the queen from this diagonal, and then this bishop on b5 is simply hanging. That's a free piece for Steve. Excellent recovery from the slightly tricky opening. And not only is Steve recovering on the board, he's recovering on the clock as well. Jay Blexy is going to have to pick up the pace here. It's sometimes very, very difficult to sort of switch gears like this at a moment's notice, right? 1 second, you're on top of the world, you're winning out of the opening, and then the next, your opponent is picking up a piece, but that doesn't mean you should slow down. You got to keep the flow going, keep the pace going. Okay, queen e3 and queen takes e5. I like these moves by Jay Blexy here. And honestly, black may still be in for a little bit of trouble here. Steve just castles and says, take my bishop on e7. I think a better try was first knight c6, attacking the queen and defending the bishop, and following that up with castles kingside. Steve, though, is going to get a few extra free, tempo moves against this queen in exchange for this bishop. Queen b4 is now forced, knight c6 can be played, but maybe this pawn on b5 is an issue. Simply h6, and this knight is almost trapped. Wow. Wow, crazy stuff going on in this game so far. I do think knight e4 is playable. Knight h3 or f3 is really going to be asking for some trouble. The bishop would capture in that case and rip open the king side. We do see knight e4 though. Okay, we see takes once, and now maybe knight c6. No, f5. I think knight c6 might have been winning a piece. I thought this was Steve's idea, the exact same tactic as bishop g4, looking to remove the queen from the defense of the knight. But perhaps Steve's smarter than I. Knight c6 would have been met with knight f6 check, picking up this bishop, which is why we probably saw f5. And now this knight's getting kicked around the board. We'll see if Steve manages to corral it here. Knight takes b5, by the way. Maybe bishop e2 is a double attack. This game's just all tactics, but the thing to notice here, Jay Blexy, 30 seconds on the clock, not enough time. Northern Fork, Steve North, with a full minute, is definitely in a commanding position on the clock. What on God's green earth is rook d4, Steve? What are you doing? Rook d4 was not it, bishop e2. And I suppose this is the counter argument to most people who, don't agree with me on the clock being so important. It's that, well, sure, I can play moves quickly and all, but then you're going to get moves like rook d4, and my opponent's going to take my pieces for free, and I'm going to lose on the board. And that will happen sometimes. That will happen sometimes. I tend to agree. But that being said, by getting so far ahead on the clock, Steve has successfully put himself in a spot where he's not even out of this game yet. I can definitely see at this level, even at higher levels, this game going either way, depending on who's the faster player. But Steve, you gotta play a move here. Gotta play rook e8 or something. Rook c8 blunders knight e7, but you gotta do something. You can't just let the clock run out, Steve. Your time advantage, where did it go? Oh, and he just resigns. Too much respect. Too much respect. I would have played on. I would have played on. In the meantime, though, what games are left? DWI against Magic M1. Let's check it out here. DWI down a queen, but he knows what blitz is all about. He's going to play on, try to play for that flag, but it's looking like he's a bit too slow here. Magic M seems to have the clock lead. Okay, some pre-moves now. Will we see a repetition, perhaps? Queen takes c1, and that does the trick for Magic M. Well done finding the check there. to take the win away from DWI. And where does this leave us? This leaves us with no games remaining. Danny Machuca still with a perfect score, 5 out of 5. Magic M and Alex, wow, 2 of the 3 top 5 are employees. That's just unacceptable. We got to get some of these regulars to do a bit better. I'm looking at you, DWI. I need you to pull this one out in the last 2 rounds. Looking at you, Manny, with 2 wins away from the lead. And by the way, Adi and Gene Aaron, both on a level score still. Bogo still up there. Northern Fork still up there. And wow, we're up to 25 players in the tournament. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you. All right, let's take a look. We have the showdown of the employees here with Alex v. Danny. We'll see if Danny, who is a St. Louis Chess Club almost OG, how he will do against the new recruit, Alex, with the white pieces here. And Danny, once again, is quite seriously paying attention to that opening lecture that I taught. Coming out with b6, bishop b7, and a5, a4. Just taking some queenside space is Danny. And as his reward, he's snapping off this bishop on d3. This is a useful bishop for white. It may look a little bit stunted behind these pawns, but later on, white is looking to push e5, open up this bishop, and deliver checkmate. So getting rid of that light squared bishop is, in fact, an accomplishment for black here, especially with less space. Okay, bishop g5, black goes h6, and we'll see Danny expanding now with g5. I expect knight f6 to come. No, h5. Danny's trying to trap this bishop, and I'm loving the way Danny is playing this tournament. Fun stuff, fun stuff. Okay, f4 by Alex, h4, bishop f2. And Alex is sort of doing the right thing here with the move f4. When your opponent leaves the king in the center, you should strive to open files, open things up, and then that's when your extra pieces are going to be useful. And Danny also does the right thing to play g4 and not allow the opening of any files. But now Alex is going to be able to start taking over in the middle of the board with moves like d5, moves like e5, and I'm not so sure where this knight's actually headed. Okay, h3, g3 is now forcing some light squared weaknesses, taking advantage of the fact that white is missing the light squared bishop. Bishop d4, I think, is actually going to be the wrong idea here by Alex. When you have so much extra space, you want to shove it in your opponent's face and make their pieces suffer. When you allow trades, that is when the lack of space becomes a little bit less relevant. If you have no pieces to use with all your extra space, then it doesn't really matter a great deal. Similarly, if your extra space isn't really stunting any of your opponent's pieces, then it is not going to be important. Danny once again trying to lock things down with f5, and once again, that is the thing to do when your opponent is better prepared to handle the opening of the position with the safer king. And Alex lets it happen. I would have been tempted to try something like e takes f6, but we see just maintaining the center here. And wow, bishop a6, the surprise move out of nowhere, is pressuring now along this diagonal. And Danny's position is probably significantly worse, but I'm starting to see the light of day. The light at the end of the tunnel is coming through. He's the first to arrive on the c file. If he can just force one last closing of the position, some d6, e6, some e6, d6, then maybe he's going to survive this one. Queen d3 by Alex, and now queen c7. If rook c1, I think the simple queen takes c1 is on Danny's mind. Okay, yeah, and Danny gets the trade of the queens now. And with the trade of the queens, I'm officially calling it, black is better. Black is better here. Okay, after this move, maybe not. Danny should have just kept the c file. If he keeps the c file, black is better. It's the only open file on the board. The weakness of black's king doesn't really matter, and black is going to be the first to invade. Instead, though, this is still going to be a game after the move c5. White now has some targets to aim for on f5, on a4, on c5, and meanwhile, black is still on the back foot. Probably rook f to b8 now, if I had to guess. Okay, king f7. But now we can take. Rook e6 is the idea. Maybe rook e8 is on Danny's mind. No, just knight g8, but now rook e6 makes a threat. Okay, knight back to e3. Alex just keeping it calm. And Alex, once again, has done a great job of staying ahead on the clock. We'll see if Danny is actually going to be able to make up this time deficit. And now, is that a free pawn on d5? Is that a free pawn on d5? Maybe, maybe not. Rook d1, rook takes d6 was the idea. Okay, rook f to b8 does come now, and this b2 pawn is weak. And Alex is going to be losing this pawn, but, you know, once again, that's the danger of playing quickly, and I think it's a danger Alex was, you know, happy to take on here. Alex willing to sacrifice some of his positional gains in order to stay ahead on that clock. Now rook takes d6, and Danny just does not have time to figure this position out. King f7, and Alex has more than double his opponent's time. Knight e4, the king will move. But what, Danny? But what's? Okay, this move is almost checkmate, but it's not quite. Oh, rook c3. That's a bit unnecessary. Bit unnecessary by Alex. It's a race to checkmate. Will Danny make it? Will he find the mate? Rook d2. Rook d2, rook c1 was mate, and we have a draw by repetition. We have a draw by repetition. Oh my goodness. Rook d2 check, king e1, rook c1 check is mate. But instead, Danny maintains his narrow lead by drawing with Alex there. What an exciting game. My goodness. And this is the final round. This is the final round now. The only person who can catch Danny is now Alex Mollering, the new recruit. So one of these two is going to be your champion. One of these two will be your champion. And who else to take down Danny than Mike Kummer in the final round? It's a matchup you couldn't make, you couldn't script this, okay? You couldn't script this. Mike has to take out Danny in the final round. Meanwhile, Alex has to take down the #1 seed to catch him for that first place spot. And maybe if they tie, we can orchestrate some kind of playoff. I think that is definitely the only fair result here. But for now, let's keep an eye on Danny v. Mike. Let's see what we can do. At first glance, it's looking good for Danny. He seems to have just captured a pawn on g5, and despite having this king on f2, maybe things are not so bad. Okay, rook g3 makes a threat. Ooh, but queen h4. It's going to be very, very difficult to save this rook. In fact, I think it's going to be impossible to save this rook. e4 is the correct idea. Now with f4, knight h6, knight f5 is difficult to stop. Okay, what is this? What is this? What is this? Everybody missed this. Danny's getting obliterated. Danny is just getting demolished by Mike. What is going on? What is happening, as Mike would say? Okay, bishop e5, now f4, but what if knight h6? Queen takes e4? Wow, this is too much. This is just too much. Bishop takes f4? What is Mike doing? Oh my god. And then e takes f4. Obviously, queen takes e4 with check had to be played, but now Mike's tactic works. He takes on g3. All of White's rooks are gone. They both died. Devastating. Okay, Danny getting destroyed. That means it's all down to Alex. Can Alex do something against D. Diaz? If Alex wins this game, he puts himself in a tie for first place. Okay, knight f6 is a threat. Is knight f6 a threat? They seem to think knight f6 is a threat. Maybe you have to include this. Okay, rook c1 defends the bishop. Knight d6 is coming. This is a great position for Alex, except for the fact that Alex just blundered his bishop for free. Okay, with the bishop off the board, I am less than enthused about the position. You know, I thought we were going to see the miracle finish where Alex takes down the #1 seed, and Mike Kummer plays spoiler, as Mike does love to do. But no, Alex is in a tough way here. And the knight falls as well. Alex had been playing so well this whole event. All right, let's jump back to Danny then, see if he can somehow stage a comeback here in order to win with without a doubt, right? You know, he would win with a loss here most likely, but that's not the way Danny wants to do it. Knight c4 now, and uh-oh. Look out, Mike. Look out. Danger is knocking at your front door, and bishop e5 will pin this queen to the king. What a game. What a game. What a road to 2000 these players are on. Yeah, the queen is falling. Danny doesn't even have to take right away. It could improve the bishops first. He does capture, though. Fair enough. A free queen is free. Okay, we see knight out to a5. And the game's not over, believe it or not. White has a queen and a bishop for 2 rooks and a pawn. That's almost even material. Not quite, but almost. Danny, though, is a little bit behind on the clock again. We'll see what he can do here. G3 is not the move. H2, now knight f5, knight g3. Mike Kummer might be winning again. Mike Kummer might be winning. In fact, how do you stop queens? How do you stop black from making a queen? You don't stop it. This is nothing. White takes here. Okay, now rook b6. Yeah. Okay, there's a check. Danny's finding the way. He's finding the way. Now there's queen to e5 to save the g3 pawn. That was playing with fire if I had ever seen it. That was definitely close to a knight takes g3, h1 queen disaster for Danny. That being said, 13 seconds left. 13 seconds. Can Danny do it? Mike still has threats. Okay, Mike has fewer threats now, but has more time. Danny has to move. He's just too slow. A6, it's just too slow. It's too slow, Danny. He's not going to make it. He's just not going to make it. 2.1, he found the pre-move. Okay, he's pre-moving now. He's going to take... Are we going to see a draw? Okay, Mike saves his final pawn. Saves his final pawn. Oh, and Danny had the right pre-move. That's a draw. Danny finishing strong with 2 absolutely wild draws, losing on the clock, but finding some way to level the playing field on the chessboard. Our final game, still in progress here, is C. Myers against Vari Shansari. And it looks good for Vari, but once again, we see the clock's running low. Yeah, black, though, is able to just make a queen here, and this will spell doom for white, although the rook has fallen now. Okay, the pawn pushes. And then what? Then check, over, over, over. That's the game. And with that, the tournament has concluded. The tournament has concluded. Your Road to 2000 champion is officially the one, the only Danny Machuca, the chess-playing wolf. And in joint second place, or apparently second and third on tiebreaks, is Magic M1, who put up a very strong showing, and D. Diaz, the pre-tournament favorite. Alex had a chance in those last 2 rounds to win it all, but ends on 4.5 out of 7 with that draw against Danny. Mike also ending on 4.5 out of 7 with another crazy draw against Danny as well. And then the Road to 2000 regulars, DWI and I Manny, both on 4 out of 7. Very respectable showing. Jay Blexy overperforming their rating with 4 out of 7. Whoever Hardick is, I don't know. Congratulations, 4 out of 7. And Adi with a level score. That's impressive against this field with 3.5. And where are the other regulars? Job Squared sounds familiar, but I don't know 100%. Nick Mike, I think, is a regular. Good showing by Nick Mike. Steve North ending on 2 points, but we saw some pretty good games from Steve. And I think Orlando probably just didn't show up for the games. Unfortunate for Orlando. Thank you all so much for joining me here today. There he is, Danny Machuca, the chess-playing wolf, your Road to 2000 champion. If Danny is interested in a free private lesson with me, I'm sure he'll be in touch, and we will check it out. Thank you all so much for joining me here. I had a blast doing this tournament. Once again, if this is the type of thing you guys like seeing, maybe we'll do some more tournament commentary on the channel here. But yeah, that does it for the Road to 2000 tonight. If you're watching live, we are going to have a pretty normal endgame lecture, nothing crazy like this, back to normalcy there. If you're watching the video version, thank you so much for checking out this crazy, crazy tournament. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the action. Ton of crazy stuff here tonight. I really enjoyed it. As always, my name is Caleb Denby, and I will see you next time.